This homeless girl was shivering and wandering the streets in the freezing winter, looking for a place to sleep tonight, when she suddenly saw a motorcycle skid across the road and crash into a guardrail. Panicking, she ran to the scene and found the biker lying motionless, blood pouring from his head. She dropped to her knees, pressed her hands against the wound, and begged him to stay awake, even though she knew helping him could get a homeless girl like her questioned by the police. What she didn't know was that just a few days later, that same man would come back and give her a life she never thought she'd have. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. The wind skimmed across the empty stretch of highway outside Detroit, sharp enough to slip through the holes in Aaliyah Carter's sleeves as she walked along the gravel shoulder, her backpack hanging off one strap, her breath faint white in the fading cold. She kept her eyes on the cracked asphalt ahead, counting steps the way she always did when she didn't know where she'd sleep. Under the overpass, behind the old gas station, maybe in the abandoned bus stop if no one else had claimed it. Then a sound ripped through the quiet, a violent metallic screech that cut straight through her chest. She spun around just in time to see a motorcycle skid across the pavement, sparks bursting under it before the bike flipped and slammed into the guardrail. The rider, leather jacket, helmet half buckled, went flying like a torn piece of cloth in the wind, hit the ground hard, and rolled until his body came to a stop, twisted unnaturally in the dust. Aaliyah froze, breath punched out of her, heart hammering in her throat. For a split second she wanted to bolt, run, hide, disappear before cops showed up, before anyone asked questions she couldn't answer. But the man didn't move. His leg bent at a sharp, impossible angle. Gasoline trickled from the torn tank, the smell stinging her nose. Something inside her clenched, a memory flashing quick and brutal. Her uncle slumped on their old couch years ago, lips turning blue, while neighbors yelled at each other about whose job it was to call 911. Too late. Always too late. Damn it, she whispered, her voice shaking as she forced her feet toward him. Damn it, damn it. Gravel crunched under her shoes. The man's chest rose in shallow jerks, a soft gurgling sound catching in his throat. Blood spilled down from a gash at his hairline, tracing the curve of his cheek, soaking into the collar of his jacket. When she crouched beside him, his eyelids fluttered weakly, revealing pale, dazed blue eyes struggling to focus. She hesitated, hands hovering over him, fear crawling up her spine. If she touched him and someone drove by? If the police found her here alone with him? If they ran her off again? But then his lips moved, barely forming words, breath catching on each syllable. Please, don't leave. Stay. Angel. The word angel cut through her defenses like a whisper from another life. Her chest tightened. Nobody called a homeless kid an angel. Nobody called her anything except move along or not my problem. She swallowed hard, dropped to her knees, and pressed both hands against the bleeding cut on his forehead. Her fingers trembled, slipping in the warm blood, but she pushed the fabric of her hoodie against the wound anyway, leaning her weight into it the way she remembered EMTs doing on TV. Hey, stay with me, okay? Don't close your eyes, you hear me? Don't you dare. The man groaned, his body twitching from pain. Somewhere deep inside him, bones scraped together with a sickening sound that made her stomach twist, but she didn't pull back. She shifted her hand to check his pulse, fingertips pressing against the side of his neck. His heartbeat fluttered erratic and weak. Come on, she muttered, voice cracking. You gotta stay awake. Gasoline hissed softly as it dripped onto the asphalt. The wind carried dust across the road. No cars, no lights, no one coming. Her hoodie darkened quickly where it soaked up blood, spreading in jagged patterns down her sleeve. She could feel his breath turning shallower, hear the faint rattle in his chest. She wanted to scream for help, but the highway swallowed her voice whole. He blinked slowly, eyes unfocused, trying to keep her face in view. She leaned closer, letting him hear her over the wind. I'm right here, she whispered, her throat tight. I'm not leaving you. His fingers twitched, brushing weakly against her wrist, as if to make sure she was real. His gaze slid out of focus again. Don't. Go. Aaliyah pressed her hand harder against the wound, ignoring the sting of cold wind and the warm stickiness creeping through her sleeve. I'm staying, she said, her voice breaking. I'm staying, I promise. Just breathe, okay? The world around them felt too big, too empty. Only the sound of his fading breath and her pounding heartbeat filled the space. She bent over him, fighting the rising panic clawing at her lungs. "Please don't die," she whispered, shaking. "Not like this. Not alone. Not tonight." His eyes fluttered once more, uncertain, searching, before settling weakly on her. She held his gaze, refusing to look away, refusing to let him slip under. And in that lonely stretch of cold Detroit pavement, for the first time in a long time, someone wasn't leaving her behind. And she wasn't leaving someone else. For a moment, Aaliyah knelt frozen beside him, the cold eating through her jeans, the roar of the crash still ringing in her ears, her breath fogging in the frigid air. Mason's head grew heavier in her hands, his skin clammy, his pulse flickering like a dying light. She looked up at the empty highway stretching into the dusk. No cars, no headlights, no help coming. Her heart slammed against her ribs as fear surged through her, sharp and undeniable. If she stayed here alone, he would bleed out. If she tried to carry him, she'd drop him. Her only chance, their only chance, was the diner she'd passed half a mile back. "I'll come back," she whispered, more a promise to herself than to him. She slipped her hoodie under his head, stood up on trembling legs, and forced her feet to move. The moment she turned and started running, the cold wind swallowed the sound of his weak groan behind her. She didn't dare look back. She just ran. The rusty diner's neon sign flickered faintly through the growing dark like a lifeline, and she sprinted toward it, lungs burning, blood drying stiff on her sleeve, praying someone, anyone, would listen before it was too late. The lights of the rusty diner glowed a dull orange against the deepening dusk. Gravel sprayed under her shoes as she stumbled up the short concrete ramp and slammed through the glass door so hard it rattled on its hinges. The bell above it shrieked, cutting across the low hum of conversation, forks scraping plates, and the tinny country music playing from a wall speaker. She bent forward, hands braced on her knees, breath tearing out of her in broken gulps. "Somebody, please. There's a man." Her voice cracked, and she forced the words out louder, desperate enough that it scraped her throat raw. "There's been an accident. He's bleeding. He's dying. Call 911, please." Every head turned, but not with alarm, not with concern. The first look she met was a suspicious squint from an older woman sitting in a red vinyl booth, her fork hovering mid-air, pie slice forgotten. Her husband leaned back, lips curling as he took in Aaliyah's hoodie, her ripped jeans, her tangled curls, the grime on her cheeks, her worn-out backpack hanging lopsided on one shoulder. "Oh, great," he muttered, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "Another one." A group of truckers at the counter snorted into their coffee. One man with a grease-stained cap shook his head, smirking. "These kids'll scream anything for $1, he mumbled. Another didn't even bother lowering his voice. If there was a real accident, we'd hear sirens by now. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with her hair in a messy bun, froze mid-step, holding a pot of coffee. Her eyes traveled slowly down Aaliyah's body, lingering on the threadbare hoodie, the frayed shoes, the backpack that had been patched so many times the fabric barely matched itself. Her expression hardened with a mix of irritation and guarded pity. "Sweetheart," she said, voice clipped, "we don't have anything for you. You can't come in here causing a scene." Aaliyah's face burned. Shame, hot, humiliating, flooded her chest, but anger shoved its way right behind it, sharp enough to sting. She took a shaky step forward, palms lifted, voice rising. "I'm not lying. There's a man outside. He crashed his bike. He's bleeding so much. I can't carry him. I need help." She choked on her own breath as a trucker scoffed. Yeah, okay. And what? You want a reward for telling us?" The waitress sighed impatiently. "Honey, we've heard every story in the book. If you need a meal, just say you need a meal. Don't make things up." The words hit her harder than the cold wind outside. Made things up. She wanted to scream. Her heart was pounding so violently she could hear it echo in her ears, drowning out the clatter of forks and the buzz of the overhead lights. She opened her mouth again, but her voice faltered, wobbling with desperation. I'm telling you, he's hurt. Her words trailed off, collapsing in on themselves. Her hands shook uncontrollably at her sides, fingers curling and uncurling as if trying to grab hold of something solid enough to keep her upright. Everything inside her screamed to run back to Mason, to drop to her knees beside him again and keep her hands pressed to his wound until her arms gave out. But she couldn't leave without help. Not if he had any chance. Her breath stuttered, her vision tunneled. People stared at her like she was a stray dog that had wandered in from the cold. Something dirty, something untrustworthy, something that didn't belong. Then one voice cut through the noise. "Hey!" It was calm, steady, not mocking. Aaliyah blinked and turned toward the counter. A young man stood there, maybe 19, with floppy brown hair and a rusty diner apron tied loosely around his waist. He'd been holding a coffee pot, but now it hung forgotten in his hand. Ethan Miller. His eyes, soft pale green, weren't narrowed or cold or suspicious. They were focused, alert, concerned. He didn't look at her hoodie or her backpack or her shoes first. He looked at her face. Really looked. "Are you sure?" he asked gently, stepping closer. "Where is he?" The room went quiet. The older couple paused mid-whisper. The truckers turned slightly on their stools. The waitress frowned. But Ethan didn't look away from Aaliyah. And that small sliver of attention, of belief, hit her harder than the judgment had. She swallowed hard, breath shuddering. "Down the road," she managed to say, pointing with a trembling hand. "Just past the curve. He hit the guardrail. His leg, his head. I tried to stop the bleeding, but—" She lifted her arm without thinking. Her sleeve was smeared dark red from wrist to elbow. The diner seemed to inhale all at once. Someone muttered, "Jesus." Aaliyah hadn't even looked at it. She didn't want to. She only saw his blood when she closed her eyes, spreading across her hoodie like an accusation. Ethan's gaze dropped to her shaking hand, her bloody sleeve, then snapped back up to her face, and suddenly every doubt vanished from his expression. He set the coffee pot down with a clatter. "Call 911, he told the waitress sharply. "Now!" She blinked, startled. "Ethan, you can't just—" "Now!" His voice cut sharper than a knife. The authority in it made her move. She reached for the phone. The truckers shifted uncomfortably, pretending they weren't watching. Ethan grabbed his jacket from the hook by the kitchen door, shrugging it on quickly. He stepped around the counter, heading straight for Aaliyah. "Show me," he said. She hesitated, chest heaving, still stunned that anyone believed her. Ethan's brows softened. "It's okay. We'll get him. Just take me there." She nodded, once, jerky like her body was reacting before her brain caught up. Then she turned and pushed back out through the door, the bell above it shrieking again as she burst into the cold evening air. Gravel crunched under Ethan's boots as he followed right behind her. Inside the diner, people whispered, some avoiding each other's eyes, others looking toward the window as though the guilt sitting in their chests was suddenly too heavy to ignore. One of the truckers muttered, "I should have listened sooner." Another grumbled, "If it's real." But no one got up to help. They just watched the two of them disappearing into the dusk, Aaliyah with her blood-soaked sleeve and frantic steps, and Ethan running after her without hesitation. Aaliyah's lungs burned as she sprinted back toward the curve in the road, gravel slipping under her shoes, the cold cutting into her face. Ethan kept pace beside her, not asking questions, not doubting her story, not telling her to slow down. Just running. "How bad is it?" he called out between breaths. "Bad," she answered, voice cracking. "His leg's broken, like really broken, and his head—" She swallowed hard, her stomach twisting. "I don't know if he's still—" "Just come on, please." They rounded the bend. The wreckage came into view. The smashed motorcycle glinted weakly under the faint streetlight, the front wheel bent inward, the metal frame twisted like foil. Mason's body was still there, crumpled near the guardrail, chest rising only slightly, like each breath cost more than he had left to give. Ethan sucked in a breath. "Holy. Okay. He pulled out his phone, already dialing. "Yeah, dispatch, male, mid-40s, severe trauma, head wound, possible compound leg fracture, Route 12 just past the Miller Crossing turnoff." Aaliyah dropped to her knees beside Mason again, sliding her hands under his head to keep it steady, her breath shaking. "I came back," she whispered, voice trembling against the cold air. "I told you I'd come back." His eyes fluttered weakly, pupils unfocused but flicking toward her voice. Ethan knelt down a few feet away, keeping on the line with 911, giving updates, checking briefly for arterial bleeding, his hands surprisingly steady for someone who'd never been this close to a near-death scene. But Aaliyah barely heard him. All she could hear was her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, and Mason's faint, broken breath rasping in and out, like a frayed thread, threatening to snap at any second. She leaned closer, gripping his hand with her trembling fingers, her voice breaking. "Hold on. Please, just hold on." For the first time since the accident, she didn't care who saw her, didn't care if she looked desperate or scared or weak. She just wanted him to live. And for the first time in that diner, someone had finally listened. Ethan's voice blended with the wind as he relayed details to the dispatcher, his words sharp, urgent, steady in a way Aaliyah knew she could never manage right now. She stayed on her knees beside Mason, her hands shaking as she tried to keep pressure on the wound without hurting him more, her breath fogging the air in frantic bursts. Mason's chest rose in shallow, uneven pulls, each breath sounding like it scraped against something broken inside him. "He's still breathing," Ethan called out, one hand pressed to his phone, the other bracing himself on the guardrail as he looked over the wreckage. "Head trauma. Legs definitely a compound fracture. I can see bone. Yeah, bone. Route 12. Just past Miller Crossing. Send EMS now." Aaliyah felt his words echo somewhere deep in her ribs. Bone. She had seen it too, jutting through torn denim, white and wrong under the sick wash of the streetlight. She couldn't look again. If she did, she was afraid her stomach would turn over and she'd lose the tiny bit of calm she'd clawed together just to stay with this man who had begged her not to leave. Mason made a soft, broken groan, and she leaned over him quickly, her voice trembling. Hey, I'm here. I'm right here. You're okay. Just hold on a little longer." His eyelids fluttered. His fingers twitched once, brushing her wrist like he was trying to make sure she hadn't vanished. The sound of sirens began faint and distant. A low wail carried on the wind. Aaliyah's eyes snapped toward the bend in the road, heart pounding. "They're coming," she whispered, half to him, half to convince herself she hadn't imagined it. The sirens grew louder, faster, until the red and blue lights splashed across the cracked asphalt, washing Mason, the motorcycle, and her blood-stained sleeve in flashes of color. The ambulance screeched to a stop, tires spitting gravel. Doors slammed, boots hit the ground. Voices barked orders as paramedics rushed out, swinging open compartments, pulling gear, kneeling beside Mason as if moving through a well-practiced rhythm. One paramedic, a woman with cropped dark hair and sharp, focused eyes, touched Aaliyah's shoulder lightly. "Sweetheart, you need to move back a bit. Let us work." Aaliyah froze. Her hands were still pressing the hoodie to Mason's forehead. Her palms were slippery with his blood. Her heartbeat hammered so loud she couldn't hear her own breath. The paramedic softened her tone. "You did the right thing, but let us take it from here, okay?" Aaliyah hesitated before finally pulling her hands away. The hoodie peeled from his skin with a sick, wet sound, and she sucked in a shaky breath as she crawled backward on the gravel, her palms scraping. Ethan moved beside her instantly, gripping her elbow, steadying her just as her legs almost gave way. She didn't realize she was shaking until she saw her fingers trembling in the red-blue light. The paramedics took over fast, checking pupils, stabilizing the neck, cutting the denim around the bone-deep fracture, sliding a brace under the leg. Mason yelped weakly, the sound small and raw, and Aaliyah flinched as if his pain traveled straight into her body. The woman paramedic murmured something gentle to him, something practiced meant to keep patients grounded. But Mason's eyes were searching past her, searching for Aaliyah. She crawled closer until she was just a few feet from the stretcher. His gaze latched onto her like a drowning man gripping the last solid thing he could find. She leaned in, her voice barely audible over the sirens and commotion. "You're okay. They're helping you. Just go with them, please." His cracked lips moved, barely shaping words. "Angel." Her breath caught, sharp and stunned. His hand lifted weakly from the ground, trembling, reaching toward her. Aaliyah didn't even think. She moved immediately, sliding her hand into his. His grip was faint, but certain. Familiar, like he needed her to stay real. As the paramedics lifted him onto the stretcher, his fingers tightened around hers with surprising force. She leaned closer, fighting tears. "You're gonna be okay," she whispered. "They're gonna save you." His eyes filled with tears, whether from pain or fear or something else she couldn't name. He swallowed hard, breath rasping, forcing out the words through the chaos. "Find me." The words were barely a breath. "I'll never forget you." Aaliyah's throat closed. For a second, the sirens, the paramedics, the whole night seemed to blur around her. All she could see was him, broken, bleeding, and still holding on to her like she was the only steady thing in his world. Then the medic gently pried their hands apart. "We have to go, sweetheart." Aaliyah jerked back to herself. The stretcher rolled. Mason's hand slipped from hers. The doors of the ambulance slammed shut with a metallic thud that echoed in her bones. Then the sirens wailed again, louder, more urgent, and the ambulance tore off down the highway, red and blue lights streaking across the dark. Aaliyah stood frozen, staring at the fading lights until they disappeared around the curve. The night felt suddenly enormous and empty. Her knees buckled. Ethan stepped in quickly, gripping her arms. Hey, you okay?" She shook her head, unsure what she was denying. Her fear, her exhaustion, or the feeling that something inside her had just cracked open. He told me not to leave him," she said, voice shaking. "And then they just took him." Ethan kept a steady hand between her shoulder blades. "They took him to save him. That's a good thing. He's got a real chance now. Because of you." She stared at the dark road where the ambulance had vanished, chest tight, eyes burning. "I don't even know his name." Ethan hesitated. "Doesn't matter. He knows you." The wind picked up, carrying the faint smell of gasoline from the wreck. The streetlight above them buzzed weakly, flickering over the twisted motorcycle frame. Aaliyah wrapped her bloodied arms around herself, suddenly aware of the cold biting through her thin hoodie. Ethan stepped in front of her. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's get you out of the cold. You can't stay out here tonight." She wanted to protest, to say she needed to go after the ambulance, to follow it anywhere it went. But the truth was, her legs were shaking so violently, she wasn't sure she could take another step on her own. So she let Ethan guide her back toward the diner, every part of her numb except the echo of Mason's last words. "Find me. I'll never forget you." The rusty diner was quiet when they returned. The customers had mostly gone home. The waitress glanced up, eyes widening slightly at the sight of Aaliyah. Bloody sleeves, scraped hands, face drained of color. Ethan walked straight to the back, speaking quietly to the owner, an older woman with gray streaks in her hair and the tired posture of someone who had been on her feet since dawn. After a moment, the owner nodded, sighing. Her eyes softened just a little when she looked at Aaliyah. Ethan returned with a worn quilt folded under his arm and a paper-wrapped burger. "Here," he said softly. "It's not much, but it's warm." Aaliyah accepted them with both hands, her throat tightening again. He led her to a long booth in the corner, the kind truckers slept in when they were too exhausted to drive. She slid into the seat, the vinyl squeaking under her weight, and pulled the quilt around her shoulders. It smelled like fryer grease and old detergent, but it was warm, and she hadn't felt warm in days. Ethan set the burger down in front of her. "Eat. You need it." She nodded, unwrapping it slowly with shaky fingers, but after one bite, her stomach clenched painfully. Hunger, meeting adrenaline, and fear. Ethan didn't push her. He just sat nearby, wiping the counter, keeping an eye on her without making her feel watched. The diner lights hummed softly above her. Somewhere outside, a semi rumbled past. But in Aaliyah's mind, the only sound left was Mason's voice. "Find me." She pulled the quilt tighter, curled onto her side on the booth bench, and stared at the dark window. She wanted to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw the crash, the blood, his hand reaching for hers. Still, exhaustion dragged at her harder than fear. Slowly, her breathing slowed, her eyelids drooped, the warmth of the quilt seeping into her bones. Just before sleep finally claimed her, she whispered into the darkness, barely audible, "I won't let you forget me." Then the diner dimmed around her, and for the first time in many nights, she slept somewhere with a roof over her head. Her dreams tangled with sirens, red lights, and a stranger's broken whisper that kept replaying in her mind like a promise she didn't understand yet, but couldn't let go of. Morning slid in slowly, pale and cold, pressing through the diner's windows until the light reached Aaliyah's face and pulled her from a restless sleep. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The vinyl booth beneath her felt strange, too soft compared to the concrete and cardboard she was used to. The heavy quilt smelled like grease and old coffee. Then the memories slammed back. The crash, the blood, Mason's voice cracking as he clung to her hand, the ambulance doors closing. Her stomach twisted. She sat up fast, gripping her backpack and wiping dried tears from her cheeks before anyone could see. Ethan was already working the early shift, moving between tables with a tired half smile. When he noticed her awake, he gave her a small nod, but the diner was filling quickly, and he was pulled back into the rush. Aaliyah tightened the straps of her worn backpack and slipped out before he could notice she was leaving. The wind outside slapped her cheeks sharper than last night, and she buried her chin into her hoodie as she headed toward St. Mary's Hospital. She had memorized the route. She'd seen the red lights flashing that way when the ambulance took Mason. She walked fast, almost running at times, weaving through patches of slush and broken pavement. Her hands were cold, her lungs stung, but her heart beat with one stubborn thought. He told me to find him. St. Mary's Hospital loomed ahead like a shining fortress, all glass and white steel. Its sliding doors whooshed open automatically, spilling out a wave of warm, sterile air that smelled like bleach and something metallic. She stepped inside. The brightness hit her like a slap. Everything was too white, too clean. The polished floors reflected her ragged shoes and torn jeans like a mirror she didn't want. People rushed in every direction, nurses pushing carts, doctors speaking in clipped tones, families carrying bags of food and flowers. For them, this place was normal. For her, it felt like walking into a world that didn't have a doorway for someone like her. She approached the front desk slowly, swallowing the nerves gathering in her throat. The receptionist, a woman with tight hair and tighter eyebrows, glanced up only when Aaliyah cleared her throat. I'm looking for someone," Aaliyah said. Her voice was thin. "A man from a motorcycle accident last night." The receptionist tapped her keyboard lazily. "Name?" I don't know his name." The woman finally looked at her fully, eyes flicking from Aaliyah's tangled hair to her dirty jeans to the frayed straps of her backpack. The judgment was fast, automatic, cold. "And you are?" she asked. "Family." "No, Aaliyah stammered. "I'm the one who helped him. I found him. I stayed with him until the ambulance came. I need to know if he's okay." The woman's expression shut like a door. "If you're not family," she said sharply, "we can't give you information. That's policy." Aaliyah's heart dropped. "But I saved him." "That doesn't make you family." The words hit harder than they should have. The receptionist lifted her chin. "Step aside if you're done. Next." Aaliyah stood frozen in place, fingers curling into the strap of her backpack. A security guard stepped up before she could breathe again. Mr. Henderson, tall, broad-shouldered, a middle-aged black man with a graying beard and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't look angry, just tired, but his voice held the weight of authority that could move mountains, or a 17-year-old girl. "Miss," he said, calm but firm, "you can't be hanging around the desk if you're not checking in. Let's step aside." "I'm not hanging around," she said quickly, panic rising. "I just need to see him. I just need a name." "Can't do that," Henderson replied. "You need to head on out." "Please," she whispered. "He told me to find him. He asked me not to leave him." Henderson softened for half a second, but rules beat sympathy every time inside places like this. He shook his head. "We're here to keep things safe, not listen to fairy tales." The words pierced her like a blade. Fairy tales, like she was a liar, like the blood on her sleeves didn't exist, like last night never happened. "But I'm telling the truth," she said, voice rising helplessly. "I'm telling the truth." A few people turned to look, some annoyed, some curious, none caring. Henderson placed a large hand on her shoulder, not harsh, but immovable. "Time to go." And just like that, she was guided toward the sliding doors. Her shoes dragged on the tile, her breath shaking, tears stinging her eyes. The doors opened with a soft hiss. Cold air hit her face again, and then she was outside. The doors shut behind her, sealing her out, like she had never belonged inside in the first place. She pressed a hand to the glass, palm flat against the cold surface. Her breath fogged the window in a trembling cloud. Inside, people moved easily, walking, talking, checking in. No one stopped her. No one asked her what she'd seen or why she was shaking. She stood there for a long moment, forehead resting against the glass, swallowing the ache in her chest until it felt like swallowing broken glass. Finally, she stepped back, hugging her backpack close, and sat down heavily on the stone steps outside. The wind tugged at her hair. Cars passed. Life moved, but she sat still, small, forgotten, staring at the ground like it could give her answers. "I tried," she whispered, voice cracking as her breath misted in the cold air. "I really tried." After a few minutes, she stood up again, wiping her face on her sleeve. Determination flickered, thin but burning. She waited until a group of nurses walked in together, then slipped behind them, timing her steps. For a moment, it worked. She blended in, kept her head down, walked fast. But Henderson was quicker. He stepped in front of her before she even reached the elevators. "Come on now," he said, more stern this time. "Don't make this harder." "Please," she begged. "You don't understand. He said he wouldn't forget me." Henderson's face tightened. "Rules are rules. Out." He guided her out again, firmer this time. When the doors slid shut the second time, it felt final, like the world inside that hospital had picked a side, and she wasn't on it. She sank to the steps again, arms wrapped tight around her backpack as if she needed to hold on to something. Anything. The wind whipped her hood back. Her fingers were numb, and all she could do was whisper into the cold. "I tried. I'm still trying." But no door opened. No one came. Aaliyah stared at her reflection in the glass, this tired, hungry, invisible girl, and wondered how someone could save a man's life one night and be treated like a ghost the next morning. Morning crept over Detroit in a pale gray smear, the kind that made everything look colder than it was. Aaliyah sat curled on a worn bench in the small park across from St. Mary's Hospital, her backpack hugged tight to her chest, her stomach twisting with hunger that had started as an ache and was now a dull, constant throb. She hadn't eaten since the half-cold burger Ethan gave her last night. The air smelled faintly of wet leaves and exhaust, the sound of traffic humming under the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. She kept her eyes fixed on the hospital entrance across the street, the sliding glass doors she had been pushed out of twice. Every time they opened for someone else, something inside her pinched. Parents walked in carrying balloons. Workers pushed carts of supplies. Doctors brushed past in white coats without a glance at her direction. They belonged there. She didn't. She pulled her hoodie tighter around her shoulders. Her breath puffed in thin clouds. She tried to tell herself that she only needed to wait, that someone would eventually come out who she could ask. But the truth pressed against her like a weight. No one knew her name, no one had listened, and Mason was somewhere inside that building, alive or dying. And she had no way of knowing. Her stomach growled loudly. Aaliyah flinched and pressed an arm across her midsection as if she could muffle the sound. A group of office workers walked past, carrying coffee and laughing. One woman said casually, "Did you hear? They finally released his name." "The motorcycle guy from last night?" another asked. "Yeah," the first woman said, lowering her voice with excitement. "Mason Hale." Aaliyah's heartbeat stuttered. She leaned forward without thinking, her ears stretching for every word. "No way." The man walking with them murmured, "Hale. The Mason Hale. Apex Systems. That guy. That guy," the woman said with emphasis. "And apparently some girl found him. Some teenager saved him. It's in the news." The trio kept walking down the sidewalk toward the bus stop, their voices fading, their laughter swallowed by the rush of morning traffic. Aaliyah froze, her breath caught mid-inhale. "Mason. His name is Mason." She whispered it under her breath, tasting it, holding it like it was something fragile she didn't want to drop. Mason. He finally had a name. Someone she had held on the road. Someone who'd called her an angel. Someone who told her, "Find me." He wasn't just a stranger anymore. He was someone the world apparently knew. Someone important. Someone with headlines. Aaliyah stood slowly, the metal bench creaking under her weight. She stepped closer to the sidewalk as another pair of pedestrians approached. Two older men in work jackets, talking loud enough that she didn't need to strain to hear. "Saw it this morning," one said. "Front page. Billionaire biker saved by mystery girl." The other chuckled. "Only a guy like that could crash a bike worth more than my house." "They say he'd be dead if not for some girl," the first man added. "No idea who she is." "Probably already gone," the second man scoffed. "These stories always make things bigger than they are." They walked off, boots thumping the pavement. Aaliyah blinked hard, her throat tightening. Mystery girl. Some girl, like she was a rumor, a shadow, something blurry at the corner of a photograph. She crossed the street quickly, dodging a delivery van, pulled by an impulse she couldn't ignore. Not hunger, not hope. Something deeper and more desperate. A small crowd had gathered around the newsstand at the corner. Commuters flipped through papers, tugging at pages, pointing and murmuring. Aaliyah pushed herself into the cluster of people, trying not to look as out of place as she felt. Her fingers were trembling by the time she reached the stand. The newspaper sat on the top row, She didn't have to touch it to recognize the picture. She felt it before she saw it. A blurry nighttime shot, a mangled motorcycle on the left, red and blue lights slicing through the dark, a stretcher in the background, and near the bottom corner, small, shadowed, hardly visible, was the silhouette of a girl kneeling on the pavement. Her hair wild, her hoodie soaked in blood. The caption, "Billionaire's life saved by guardian angel. But who is she?" Aaliyah's breath caught like someone had pressed a hand to her throat. For a moment, the world narrowed to that single photograph. She looked at it closer, gripping the edge of the stand to steady herself. Her hands shook so violently, she almost ripped the paper. She barely recognized herself, not because the photo was blurry, but because in the picture she looked like she belonged in the chaos, like someone brave instead of someone terrified. A man beside her leaned over to look. "Crazy, huh?" he said to no one in particular. "They say she was just some kid." "Wish they found her," another woman commented. "People should know who she is. Saving a billionaire? That's not small." Aaliyah flinched at the word billionaire. Suddenly, everything made sense. The swarm of attention, the reporters outside, the reason everyone was talking. Mason wasn't just some biker. He wasn't just some man on the road. He was Mason Hale, a man whose face people recognized, a man whose company filled downtown towers, a man whose life mattered to the world. And she was the invisible part of his story. She was the blurred corner of a photograph no one could name. Aaliyah stepped back from the crowd slowly, her ears ringing as though the world was too loud and too far away all at once. She hugged her backpack tight to her chest and moved to the edge of the sidewalk, her breath shaky, her eyes burning. "It's me," she whispered to herself, voice lost under the roar of passing cars. "It's me." But no one looked at her, no one turned. No one recognized the girl with the tangled hair and the torn sneakers and the oversized hoodie. They just kept flipping pages, kept talking about the girl, the angel, like she was a myth, not a living person standing 10 feet away. Aaliyah backed into the shadow of a nearby building. Her legs felt weak again, like last night when she knelt beside Mason and watched his blood soak into her clothes. She pressed the heels of her palms to her eyes until colors flashed behind her lids. She wanted to step forward, raise her voice, say, "I'm the girl. I'm the one who held him. I'm the one he begged not to leave." But fear froze her throat. Fear of how people looked at her last night in the diner. Fear of being called a liar. Fear of being judged for wanting recognition, as if she were trying to cling to a rich man for attention or money. The humiliation from the receptionist, the disbelief in Henderson's eyes, the whispers in the diner echoed through her again. Another homeless kid making up stories. Why would a billionaire have anything to do with her? People like her are always looking for a way in. Aaliyah slid down the brick wall until she crouched on the sidewalk, her forehead resting against her knees, her breath shaky. Her fingers still clutched the newspaper she had taken without realizing. She lifted it again, staring at that blurry silhouette that was supposed to be her. "Nobody knows," she whispered. "Nobody ever knows." She thought of Mason's hand gripping hers, his voice rasping in the dark. "Find me. I'll never forget you." But standing here now, surrounded by strangers praising a nameless girl they didn't actually care about, she felt small again, invisible, like she existed only in the moments when someone needed her. And once those moments passed, she disappeared. "It's me," she whispered again, softer this time. "But nobody knows." And as the city buzzed around her, cars honking, people laughing, the hospital across the street swallowing and releasing strangers, Aaliyah felt the weight of a truth she had known her whole life settle back onto her shoulders. The world only saw who it wanted to see, and right now, it still didn't see her. The steady beeping of machines pulled Mason Hale back toward consciousness like a faint light, tugging him up from deep water, each sound sharp and foreign until his mind finally latched onto it. When his eyes opened, the hospital room swam in a pale blur, white ceiling, harsh fluorescent glow, the sterile smell of antiseptic tightening the back of his throat. His body felt heavy, restrained, the weight of bandages and a stiff brace locking his leg in place. His head throbbed under the thick wrap around his forehead, and for a moment he lay still, disoriented, listening to the soft hum of oxygen, the shuffle of medical shoes outside his door, the muted chatter of nurses exchanging notes. Then, a memory cut through the haze. Cold asphalt, the metallic taste of blood, the sting of air in his lungs, and a small voice whispering, "Don't leave. I'm here. Please stay awake." His eyes blinked sharper, breath tightening as the image formed fully. A girl, trembling, with wild curls and terrified eyes, her hands pressing her torn hoodie against his bleeding forehead. He remembered her voice cracking as she begged him not to close his eyes. He remembered the warmth of her hand when he thought the world was slipping away. And the last thing he remembered, her promise. "I'll come back." His fingers twitched weakly against the blanket. "The girl," he murmured, voice hoarse, rough like gravel dragged across metal. Where's the girl?" The room shifted as a doctor in blue scrubs approached, checking the monitors with practiced motions. "Mr. Hale," the doctor said, tone calm but clinical. "Good to see you awake. You're stable. The surgery on your leg went well, and we're monitoring your head injury closely." Mason swallowed hard, ignoring the information that should have mattered. "The girl," he repeated, his voice stronger now despite the dryness clawing at his throat. "The girl who was with me. Did they find her?" The doctor paused, glancing down at the chart before answering. "All we know is that someone, a young female, called 911 from the scene. When EMS arrived, she was gone." "Gone?" Mason's heartbeat spiked on the monitor. The doctor raised a hand gently. "She wasn't identified. She didn't give her name. She wasn't here when the paramedics loaded you into the ambulance." Mason tried to sit up, a sharp pain stabbing his ribs and leg, forcing him to drop back against the pillows with a groan. "She didn't leave," he said through clenched teeth. "She stayed with me until they took me away. I held her hand. She kept me awake. She saved my damn life." The doctor nodded slowly. "And we're grateful she acted quickly. Without her call, you wouldn't be here right now." "But where is she?" Mason shot back, frustration cutting through his exhaustion like a blade. Before the doctor could answer, the door opened and Dana Cole stepped inside, her expression pale with worry and her hair pulled back in a neat twist that had clearly been ruined by hours without sleep. She carried a tablet in one hand, her sharp eyes scanning Mason like she was taking inventory of every bruise and bandage. "Jesus, Mason," she breathed, dropping into the chair beside his bed. "You scared the hell out of me. The entire company is losing its mind. The reporters, everyone." "Dana," Mason interrupted, eyes locked on hers, voice quiet but fierce. "The girl, find her." Dana blinked. "The what?" "The girl who saved me," he said. 17, maybe younger, maybe older. I couldn't tell. Black, small, terrified, but she stayed with me. She didn't run. She pressed her sweatshirt to my head and kept talking to me so I wouldn't pass out. She called 911. His voice broke for a second, not from pain, but from something deeper, a mixture of gratitude and guilt that tightened his throat. "She's the reason I'm alive." Dana straightened in her chair, the shift subtle but immediate. Professional mode, focus sharpening like a blade. "Do you know her name?" "No." Mason closed his eyes tightly. "I asked her not to leave. She said she'd come back. I don't know if she did." The doctor cleared his throat gently. "Security said a girl tried to enter earlier this morning. Young, carrying a backpack, wearing an oversized hoodie, but she wasn't allowed inside because she wasn't family. She didn't leave a name." Mason's eyes flew open. "She was here?" The doctor nodded. "Possibly. We can't be sure. She left before anyone could question her. Hospital policy is strict." "Then change the damn policy," Mason snapped, his voice cracking from the force behind it. "Or override it, or make an exception. I don't care what it takes." Dana placed a calming hand on his arm. "Mason." "Find her, Dana," he said again, quieter this time, but with a tremor that made the words heavier, more urgent. "I owe her my life. I need to know she's safe." Dana studied his face for a long moment, and something in her expression softened, something almost protective. She nodded once, firm and decisive. "Okay, I'll find her." "I mean it," Mason said, every syllable etched with urgency. "I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what you have to do. Find her." Dana opened her tablet immediately, fingers flying across the screen. "I'll start with 911. They log every call with timestamps. If she used a phone, we can trace it. If she used someone else's, we can track that too." The doctor added, "And EMS has dashcam footage. Maybe there's something in the background. Someone running. Someone watching." "Good," Dana said. "I'll request the files." She turned back to Mason, her tone all business. "Anything else you remember? Accent? Clothes?" A gray hoodie, Mason whispered, torn at the sleeves, backpack with frayed straps. She smelled like smoke and cold air. His voice softened. She held my hand like she wasn't going to let go. Even though she was shaking like she wanted to run, Dana tapped her pen against her knee. Okay, I'll canvass the area where the accident happened. I'll talk to the police, the diner owners near Route 12, anyone who might have seen a girl matching that description. Mason's pulse echoed loudly on the monitor. Don't let them brush her off. Dana's eyes hardened. They won't, not with your name attached to the request. The doctor cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, the press is waiting outside for a statement. They've been requesting interviews since dawn. No. Mason didn't hesitate. No interviews. Sir, not until we find her. His jaw tightened. I'm not answering a single question until someone tells me that girl's name. Dana's brows lifted slightly in surprise, but also respect. I'll let the PR team know. And Dana? Mason added, voice quiet, but unshakably firm. Make her the top priority. She wrote it immediately on the top line of her tablet. Priority number 1, the girl. Then she stood, straightened her blazer, and headed toward the door with the energy of someone preparing for war. As she left, Mason leaned back against the pillows, the pain in his leg pulsing, his head throbbing. But none of it mattered compared to the ache in his chest. He stared toward the window, the sky outside a washed-out gray, the world still moving without the girl who had held him when the world almost ended. He whispered into the empty room so softly the machines could barely hear it. Please be okay. And somewhere outside those hospital walls, in a park, hungry and invisible, Aaliyah had no idea that the man she saved was using every bit of his power, name, and voice to find the girl the world overlooked. Dana started early the next morning, her tablet already buzzing with notifications by the time she stepped into her rental car, sunlight barely warming the frost on the windshield as she reviewed the 911 dispatch logs again, eyes sharp, brain locked into the hunt. The call had come from a number that couldn't be traced to a person, just a payphone near Route 12, a detail that narrowed her search to the one spot on the highway where a payphone still existed, the Rusty Diner, and she drove there without stopping, pushing through traffic with a focus that tightened her jaw because Mason's voice kept replaying in her mind, that raw urgency when he said, "Find her," and she intended to do exactly that. The diner looked smaller than she expected, a squat building with chipped paint and an old neon sign humming faintly even in daylight. And the moment she stepped inside, she felt every eye glance at her, weighing her, as diners always did when someone new entered a space where routine was religion. But she ignored them, scanning the room until she saw the young man behind the counter, brown hair, tired eyes, moving with the practiced weariness of someone who had clocked too many hours already. Ethan Miller, she asked, flipping her ID wallet open just enough to show legitimacy without inviting conversation. Ethan blinked, glancing at the badge, then at her eyes, and nodded cautiously. Yeah, that's me. I'm looking for a girl, Dana said, cutting straight to the point because she didn't have time for softness. Teenage, black, dark, curly hair, gray hoodie, backpack that's falling apart. Was she here 2 nights ago? Ethan froze, the kind of stillness that meant the answer was yes before he even spoke. Yeah, he said quietly, setting down the mug he'd been drying. She came in, screaming for help. She's the one who called 911. Donna exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Did she give a name? No, he said. Wouldn't even tell me where she stayed. Just ran out the second we got to the crash. Do you know where she might be now? Ethan hesitated, glancing toward the window as if she might walk by at that exact moment. She's not from around here. I mean, she's around here, but not from here, if that makes sense. She's been sleeping in the park across from St. Mary's, sometimes behind the bus stop. Depends on the weather. Dana took notes rapidly. Does she come back here often? Not really, he said. Only came in that night because she thought no one would believe her. And they didn't. His voice dipped, a flicker of guilt in it. She was covered in blood. Not hers. His. Dana closed her eyes for a beat. The girl. Always the girl. Do you know how I can contact her? She asked. Ethan shook his head, then paused, checking his pockets like he remembered something halfway through the movement. I gave her my number the next morning. She didn't ask for it or anything. I just felt like she might need help at some point. He pulled out a small notepad and scribbled the number, handing it to Dana. She never called, but she has it. Dana tucked the paper carefully between the pages of her tablet case, treating it like the first real lead she'd gotten. Thank you. Ethan nodded, then added softly, if you find her, tell her I'm glad she told me the truth. She looked like she wasn't used to people believing her. Donna's throat tightened, not sentimentally, but with a growing sense of what this girl had endured. She left the diner immediately, crossing the street and heading toward the park as Ethan had described, her shoes crunching on patches of dead grass and scattered trash as she scanned each bench, each tree line, each shadowed corner where someone might try to sleep. She crossed the entire park twice. Nothing, only a man wrapped in a tarp who pointed his chin toward the hospital. You looking for the girl? He asked, voice gravelly from cold nights and cheap cigarettes. Dana's posture sharpened instantly. Yes, have you seen her? The man shrugged under the tarp. Comes here most nights. Watches the hospital like she's waiting for a miracle. Quiet kid. Don't bother nobody. When was the last time you saw her? Dana asked, leaning closer. Couple hours ago, he said. Went toward the 24-hour mart, probably looking for food. Dana looked toward the hospital entrance reflexively, and that was the exact moment she missed Aaliyah walking out from behind the row of vending machines, thin, exhausted, holding a bruised apple she'd managed to buy with the few coins she had left. If Dana had turned her head just a fraction more, they would have seen each other. Instead, Dana was already walking toward the bus stop, scanning the sidewalks, while Aaliyah limped across the grass toward the edge of the park, the apple small in her hand but precious enough that she ate it slowly, swallowing each bite like it might be her last decent meal today. Aaliyah was wearing the same hoodie, though now she had scrubbed it as clean as possible in a gas station bathroom. The blood was still visible. Faint stains she couldn't wash out no matter how long she held it under cold water. Her stomach twisted again, louder this time, reminding her how long it had been since she'd eaten more than scraps, and she wrapped her arms around herself as she walked, head down, eyes scanning the ground the way homeless teens learn to, watching for dropped coins, for discarded bottles that could be returned, anything that would buy her another day. She tried to apply at a cafe earlier that morning, but the manager had taken one look at her backpack and her clothes and stepped in front of the counter like she was a threat rather than someone asking for work. We're not hiring, he'd said. She had pointed at the sign on the door. Help wanted. He removed the sign while staring right into her eyes. She left before she cried. Another fast food place told her they couldn't hire someone without a home address. Another restaurant said they didn't need more dishwashers. She was pretty sure they hadn't even listened. She had tried over and over, each rejection tightening something inside her chest until it hurt to breathe. By mid-afternoon, she found herself drifting back toward the park, her legs aching, her head spinning with hunger, the world tilting slightly whenever she stood too fast. She found her usual bench, tucked behind a row of bushes, close enough to see the hospital, but far enough to avoid being shooed away by security. She sat and pulled her knees to her chest, staring at the glowing building across the street, the same building that had pushed her out, as if she were a stray dog. Maybe he forgot, she whispered to the wind, her voice barely stronger than the rustling leaves. Maybe rich people always forget. The words hurt even as she said them, like swallowing something sharp. She didn't want to believe it, but the longer she went without any sign of him, the more the thought crept in. Maybe he hadn't meant what he said. Maybe it was just the pain or the fear or the shock. Maybe once he woke up in his perfect room with perfect people around him, he'd realize she didn't fit into his life at all. Meanwhile, Dana stood at the edge of the park asking the tarp-wrapped man, if she comes back, will she? Does she usually? The man nodded. Yeah, girl don't got many places to go, eats when she can, sleeps when she can. But she comes back here to stare at that hospital like she's waiting for somebody inside to notice her. Dana's breath paused for half a second. The girl who saved Mason Hale was sitting in this park, watching the building while being turned away at the door. She scanned the benches again, heart thudding. But she had walked past the exact spot where Aaliyah usually sat. And today, the girl had chosen a deeper corner, hidden behind shrubs to shield herself from the biting wind. Dana stepped onto the sidewalk, pulling up the map on her tablet, planning her next move, completely unaware that Aaliyah stood just 20 feet behind her, head bowed, chewing the last bite of the apple, as though dragging out the feeling of having something in her stomach. The sun lowered, the air cooling fast, streetlights flickering awake one by one. Dana walked the entire block, asking store owners, gas station clerks, even a crossing guard who had seen a girl matching the description once or twice. Every answer was almost enough, close enough, but never exact. Saw her earlier. She's around sometimes. Thin kid, right? Gray hoodie. Yeah, think she went that way. It was like chasing smoke, and with each almost sighting, the distance between them tightened, then slipped, tightened, then slipped again. Dana leaving the market just minutes before Aaliyah entered. Aaliyah leaving the park seconds before Dana walked the path she had just taken. It was a dance neither of them knew they were part of. By the time night settled fully, the temperature dropped, and Aaliyah curled tighter into her hoodie, shivering, watching the hospital windows glow like stars she couldn't reach. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I shouldn't have stayed. I should have kept walking. None of this was meant for me." Her fingers brushed something in her pocket, a folded piece of paper, Ethan's number. She pulled it out slowly, running her thumb over the ink. "If anything happens, call me." But she didn't call. She didn't know how to ask for help. Across the street, a police cruiser slowed as it passed the park. Dana stood under a lamppost, studying the notes she gathered, her breath fogging the air. "She's close," she murmured, not knowing how true it was. And on the bench in the shadows, Aaliyah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, whispering into the cold, "Maybe nobody's looking. Maybe I should leave before I start hoping for things I can't have." The wind blew her hair into her face as she curled tighter, watching the hospital lights flicker like distant promises she didn't believe in anymore. Unaware that someone was, in fact, looking for her with everything he had. Unaware that the world was seconds away from colliding her story with his again. The streetlights flickered on one by one as the sun slipped out of Detroit, leaving the park washed in that familiar, tired yellow glow that made everything look softer than it really was. Aaliyah sat beneath the tallest lamp, her knees pulled tight to her chest, the cold biting through her jeans no matter how small she tried to make herself. She had spread a crumpled receipt on her thigh, gripping a cheap pen she found near the bus stop earlier, trying to write, even though her fingers were numb. The words shook across the paper in messy loops. "If tomorrow I die, at least I didn't leave him alone." She stared at the line, throat tightening. She didn't know why she wrote it. Maybe so that someone, anyone, would know she tried. Maybe because no one ever asked. She pulled her hoodie tighter around her, listening to the wind cut through the empty swings nearby, and for a moment she felt so small she could disappear without the world noticing. Across the street, St. Mary's glowed like a city of its own, warm and unreachable. She watched the doors open for families carrying bags of food, watched nurses walk out laughing, watched security wave people in with barely a glance. Nobody stopped them. Nobody asked them who they belonged to. Aaliyah lowered her eyes to the receipt again, but the words blurred as her vision stung. She wiped her cheek with the back of her sleeve, telling herself it was just the cold. She didn't hear Dana's footsteps at first. Quiet, steady, purposeful, moving across the grass toward her. Dana had returned to the park just as Ethan told her. After dark, when the girl was most likely to curl into herself somewhere near the hospital she wouldn't let go of. Dana scanned the shadows under each lamp, her breath pale in the night air. She was about to turn back when she saw a small figure under the farthest light, hunched over a piece of paper, shoulders trembling in a way that made Dana's heart twist. Because she recognized the posture of someone trying to hold themselves together. She stepped closer, slow enough not to startle her. "Hey," Dana said softly. Her voice barely carried over the wind, but Aaliyah still jerked, snapping her head up, eyes wide with fear. She scrambled to her feet so fast the pen fell from her hand. I didn't take anything," she blurted, backing away. "I'm not doing anything wrong. I'll go, okay? I'll go." Dana raised both hands gently. "You're not in trouble." "Then why are you here?" Aaliyah's breathing grew uneven, defenses rising like walls she'd had to build too early in life. "People only come looking for me when they want me gone." A pause. Then Dana said the first real question that mattered. "Are you Aaliyah?" The world froze. Aaliyah's lungs stopped mid-breath. Her eyes darted left and right, searching for traps, for police, for anyone waiting to drag her somewhere she didn't want to go. Who told you that name? She whispered. Ethan, Dana said. He told me you might be here. She took one step forward, careful and slow. I work for Mason Hale. Aaliyah blinked, her lips parting without sound. For a moment she thought she misheard. What? Mason Hale, Dana repeated. The man from the motorcycle accident. Aaliyah's pulse thudded against her ribs. She shook her head like the name might break her open. Why are you saying his name to me? Because he woke up, Dana said softly, and the first thing he asked for was you. Aaliyah froze. Breath caught somewhere in her chest that felt too tight, too full. No, she whispered. No, you're lying. I'm not. Dana stepped into the yellow circle of light with her palms open, her face lit warm and steady. He's been looking for you since yesterday. He wouldn't talk to the press. He told the doctors to locate you. He told me, find her. I owe her my life. Those were his exact words. Aaliyah's knees buckled slightly, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes filling like something inside her finally cracked open, not from pain this time, but from disbelief so deep it felt like falling. He didn't forget. Her voice trembled violently. People always forget. He didn't, Dana said. Not even for a second. The wind rustled the bushes nearby. A car horn echoed faintly from the main road. Somewhere behind them, a bottle rolled on the sidewalk. But inside that circle of lamplight, the world narrowed to just the two of them. One girl who had spent her life unseen, and one woman who had spent the last 48 hours trying to bring her back into someone's world. Aaliyah swallowed hard, shaking her head again, but this time it wasn't denial. It was fear. If he's rich, she whispered, why would he care about a homeless girl? Dana's expression softened. Not pity, not condescension, but something rarer. Respect. Because you saved him, she said simply. And he knows what that means. Aaliyah wiped her face with the sleeve of her hoodie, leaving a faint streak of dirt on her cheek. What if he doesn't want to see me after he finds out who I am? He already knows the only thing that matters, Dana replied, that you stayed with him when everyone else drove past. Silence hung between them, heavy and fragile. Then Dana slowly extended her hand, not forcing, not demanding, just offering. Let me take you to the man whose life you saved. Aaliyah stared at that hand for several long seconds. It didn't look like an order. It didn't look like charity. It looked like a bridge she had never been given before. Her fingers trembled at her sides. She looked down at her shoes, frayed, muddy, splitting at the seams. Her hoodie, still faintly stained. Her backpack, dirty, worn, practically holding her whole life inside it. Everything about her screamed no one important. Everything except the fact that someone, somewhere, had said, find her, like she mattered. Her breath shuddered as she stepped forward one careful inch, then another. She lifted her hand slowly, hesitantly, as if afraid Dana might pull hers away. But Dana didn't move. She kept her arms steady, eyes warm and sure, waiting for the moment the girl decided to believe. Then finally, Aaliyah placed her cold, shaking hand into Dana's. It was small, fragile, but real. Dana closed her fingers gently around it, and for the first time in a very long time, Aaliyah wasn't invisible. She wasn't a rumor. She wasn't a blurry shadow in a newspaper photo. She was Aaliyah, called by her real name, seen and known by someone who didn't want anything from her except the chance to give her back what she had given. Come on, Dana said softly. He's waiting for you. And under the dim yellow glow of the lamppost, Aaliyah nodded, her voice too full for words, as the weight of being seen, truly seen, finally broke open inside her, warm and overwhelming, and new. Dana led Aaliyah across the street toward St. Mary's, her steady hand still wrapped around the girl's cold fingers, guiding her toward the building that had once treated her like she didn't exist. The automatic doors slid open with that same soft hiss as before, but this time Aaliyah didn't flinch, though her breath still caught at the sight of the bright lobby, the polished floors, the nurses moving with purpose, the hum of machines and intercom announcements echoing overhead. Last time she stepped inside, she had been pushed out before she could take 5 steps. Now, every light felt too bright, every sound too sharp, every stare a reminder that she didn't belong here. She squeezed her backpack strap with her free hand, trying to slow her breathing, but her pulse thudded fast and shallow. A nurse behind the desk glanced up, her eyes flicking between Dana's professional stride and Aaliyah's hesitant steps. Aaliyah braced for the familiar tightening in their expression, the silent question, "What is she doing here?" But instead, the nurse simply looked confused. And then Henderson appeared from around the corner, a tall, broad silhouette she recognized instantly. His brows shot up, surprise cutting through his stern exterior. "You again," he said, then turned to Dana. "Ma'am, is everything—" Dana flashed her ID, and her calm, sharp tone slipped in before he could finish. "She's with me. We're going to see Mason Hale." Henderson blinked, hard. His eyes flicked back to Aaliyah as if trying to reconcile the girl he'd twice escorted out with the girl now being led in by someone carrying authority he couldn't challenge. "She's with Mr. Hale?" Dana nodded once. "Yes, and per his direct instruction, she has full access. If there's any issue, I can call his legal team and clear it up." Henderson straightened immediately, his posture shifting with a hint of guilt. "No issue," he said quietly. "Go right ahead." Aaliyah didn't say a word, but she felt a tight, aching pressure in her chest, part relief, part disbelief, part something deeper she didn't have a name for. They took the elevator up to the recovery floor. Aaliyah's hands shook all the way up, her stomach twisting so tightly she felt like she hadn't eaten in days. What if he didn't really want to see her? What if he changed his mind? What if he saw her under the bright hospital lights and finally realized how different their worlds were? The elevator chimed softly, and Dana led her into a quiet hallway lined with closed doors. The smell of antiseptic was stronger here, the lights gentler. Dana slowed near the end of the hall, glanced back at Aaliyah, and offered a small, grounding smile. "He's awake. He's been asking for you all day." Aaliyah swallowed hard. Her throat felt like it might close. Dana knocked once before pushing open the door. Inside, Mason sat propped upright, a brace immobilizing his leg, bandages wrapping across his forehead. His beard was a little thicker, his skin pale, but his eyes, when they lifted, were sharp, clear, searching the doorway with a desperation that softened into something bright and warm the moment he saw her. "You came." His voice cracked. He blinked, breath trembling in his chest. "Aaliyah." Hearing her name in his voice, steady, certain, full of recognition, shook something loose inside her, something that made her feel suddenly weightless and heavy at the same time. She took one step inside, then another. You remembered me," she whispered. Mason let out a soft breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but didn't quite make it there. "I'd remember you anywhere." Dana closed the door behind them and stepped aside, letting the world shrink to just the two of them. Aaliyah approached the bed slowly, holding her backpack like a shield against everything she feared she was. Too poor, too small, too invisible, too unimportant to be standing here. But Mason didn't see any of that. His gaze held nothing but gratitude, warmth, and a kind of gentle awe. "I looked for you," he said. "As soon as I woke up, I thought maybe I imagined you. Maybe you weren't real. But you were." Aaliyah tried to smile, but it faltered. "They wouldn't let me in," she said softly. "I tried." Mason's jaw tightened, anger flickering briefly behind his eyes. "They should have," he said. "You saved my life." Aaliyah shook her head. I couldn't walk away." "That's exactly why you saved me." She lowered her gaze, fingers twisting around her backpack strap. "People don't usually care when it's someone like me." Mason leaned forward, wincing slightly but refusing to look away from her. "Then they're wrong." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The monitor beeped softly. The hallway murmured behind the closed door. Then Aaliyah finally found her voice. "I've been on the street since I was 13, she said quietly. "Shelters, alleyways, abandoned houses. People look at me and think I'm trouble, or trash, or nothing." She swallowed hard. "I didn't think someone like you would want to see someone like me." Mason closed his eyes briefly, as if the words physically hurt. "I lay on that road thinking everything was over," he said, "and all I could hear was your voice. You kept me awake. You kept me alive." He lifted a hand slightly, motioning her closer. "You didn't walk away when everyone else would have. I'm not walking away from you either." Aaliyah's breath caught. What does that mean?" Mason glanced at Dana, then back at the girl who had carried him with nothing more than her trembling hands and stubborn heart. "It means I'm going to make sure you're safe. Legally, permanently." Her heart stopped for a beat. "Safe?" "Dana's already contacted a legal team," Mason said. "We're arranging temporary guardianship, working with social services, getting you a caseworker who answers to us. No more shelters, no more sleeping outside, no one pushing you out of places because they don't want to see you." Aaliyah stared at him like he'd spoken in a language she didn't know. "You want to take care of me?" "Yes," he said simply. "If you'll let me." Her throat closed around a sob she didn't want to make. "Why? I'm nobody." Mason shook his head, slow and firm. "You're the girl who didn't leave me to die." His voice deepened with something unshakable. "That makes you somebody." Aaliyah wiped her face fast, embarrassed by the tears. "What if the hospital people try to stop me again?" Mason glanced at the door, then at Dana, then back at her with a look that shifted the air in the room. "They won't." He shifted slightly, wincing, and pressed the nurse call button. Moments later, a nurse entered, and so did Henderson, lingering in the doorway. Mason pointed at Aaliyah. "She's with me," he said, voice clear and commanding despite the pain. "She has full access, and she comes and goes whenever she wants. If anyone has a problem with that, they can speak to my lawyers." The nurse blinked, nodding quickly. Henderson lowered his eyes, shame softening his face. "Understood, Mr. Hale." Aaliyah watched, stunned, as the world that had shut her out now opened because of 6 simple words. "She's with me." When they left, Mason looked back at her wristband. White plastic with typed black letters. Contact Dana Cole. Emergency. He tapped it gently. "We're adding your name too," he said. Aaliyah's breath hitched again, tears spilling before she could stop them. She covered her mouth with one hand, overwhelmed, shaking. The idea of being someone's emergency contact so foreign, so impossibly precious, that she couldn't breathe for a moment. "Family doesn't have to be blood," Mason said softly. "Sometimes it's the people who show up when it matters." And for the first time in her life, Aaliyah felt the truth of that in her bones. The weeks that followed moved slowly at first. Then all at once, like a life that had been frozen for years finally beginning to thaw, Aaliyah stepped into Mason's house the way someone steps into a museum after hours. Quiet, careful, overwhelmed by the idea that she was allowed to touch anything. The first night she stood in the doorway of the bedroom Dana had arranged for her. Soft yellow lamp on the desk, a bed with crisp white sheets, a small bookshelf holding notebooks and pencils, and she couldn't make her feet cross the threshold. She kept waiting for someone to shout, "Not for you." But no one did. Instead, Mason called from down the hall, voice steady but warm. "It's yours, Aaliyah. All of it. You're home." And just like that, something inside her cracked open. She stepped in, set her backpack, the same torn one she'd slept with under park lights, onto the neatly made bed, and for the first time since she could remember, she let her shoulders drop. The air smelled faintly of clean linen, not mildew, not gasoline, not alleyway dirt, just safety. The next days were a blur of paperwork, appointments, soft-spoken caseworkers, signatures, and counselors. Aaliyah sat through each one with a stiffness she couldn't hide, waiting for the moment someone would say the words she'd heard too many times. "You don't qualify. You don't belong. We can't help you." But that moment never came, because every time an obstacle rose up, Mason dismantled it with a calm authority she'd never seen anyone use on her behalf. When a social worker questioned her lack of school attendance, he leaned forward and said, "I'll personally cover her enrollment, tutoring, evaluations, anything she needs." When a counselor asked about her history of trauma in a too casual tone, Mason interrupted gently, "She'll share what she wants to share. No pressure." For the first time, adults with power weren't using it to push her away. They were using it to build a bridge underneath her feet. And the strangest part was how quickly her world shifted. Her life stretched from just surviving the day to having a schedule. School at 9, therapy Tuesdays and Thursdays, appointments with a mentor from a youth program, homework spread across her new desk, warm dinners she didn't have to earn by waiting near dumpsters or hoping a restaurant worker took pity. One afternoon, Mason invited her to sit with him in his home office. He moved slower now, still healing, still leaning on a cane, but his eyes were sharper than ever. "I want to tell you something," he said, tapping his pen lightly on the desk. You didn't just save my life. You gave me direction." Aaliyah blinked. "What do you mean?" Mason turned a folder toward her. Proposal documents, budgets, partnerships. "I'm launching a youth outreach project," he said, "for homeless teens. Shelter, education, counselors, real support. Not the Band-Aid stuff that forgets kids like you exist." Aaliyah swallowed. "Because of me?" He nodded. "Because of you." And just like that, she wasn't invisible anymore. Word of Mason's public commitment spread quickly, and soon reporters were calling, emailing, waiting outside the hospital and his home. Dana fielded them with expert precision, and Mason refused every request that hinted at twisting Aaliyah's story. If they want to talk about homelessness and structural failure, fine, he told Dana. If they want her face for clicks, absolutely not. For the first time, someone protected her name instead of exploiting it. Aaliyah returned to school mid-semester. It felt like walking into a world she didn't know how to live in anymore. Kids laughing by lockers, complaining about tests, trading snacks, planning weekend trips. But slowly, painfully, she adjusted. She showed up. She tried. She studied. She kept her head down. And the teachers, once wary, slowly began to see she wasn't trouble. She was just a kid who had never been given a chance. One Friday evening, as Mason rested on the couch with his leg propped on pillows, the doorbell rang. Aaliyah opened it and broke into a smile she didn't even realize she had in her. "Ethan!" The diner kid stood awkwardly on the porch, holding a plastic container. "Brought you some of Mrs. Carter's peach cobbler. She said you earned it." Aaliyah stepped aside. "Come in, please." He entered, stared around at the warm lights and polished floors. "Dang," he whispered. "You live here now?" She nodded. "Yeah, this is my home." The word felt strange coming out of her mouth. Heavy, holy, real. Ethan nodded slowly, something like pride flickering in his eyes. "Good, you deserve that." The next morning, Aaliyah walked past St. Mary's again on her way home from picking up school supplies. She stopped across the street, staring at the doors she'd been thrown out of twice. Henderson stood outside talking to another guard, and when he saw her, he nodded respectfully. "Morning, Miss Carter." She blinked. Miss Carter. Like she mattered, like she belonged enough to be called by name. She walked on toward the rusty diner. The bell over the door jingled. The same old-timers were there. The same truck drivers, the same waitress. But this time, when she walked in, people looked up and didn't look away. They nodded, soft, apologetic, respectful. The waitress slid a plate across the counter. "On the house," she said gently. "And thank you for what you did." Aaliyah smiled, small but full. She stepped back into the cool morning light, letting the breeze brush across her face. Then she walked toward the park, the one where she used to sleep under a flickering lamppost. A small girl, maybe 12, sat curled on the same concrete bench Aaliyah had once claimed as her bed. Torn jacket, dirt on her knees, fear hiding behind her eyes. Aaliyah paused, then approached slowly, gently, kneeling down to meet the girl's eyes. "Hey," she murmured, offering a wrapped muffin she'd saved from the diner. "You hungry?" The girl hesitated, then nodded. Aaliyah pressed the food into her hands. "I know what it feels like," she said softly. "You're not invisible, okay?" The girl looked up, eyes wet. "Okay." Aaliyah sat with her a moment, letting silence settle like something warm. A breeze rustled leaves overhead. Cars passed. Life moved on. And in the voiceover of her own heart, she heard the words that had stayed with her since the night she kept a stranger alive on an empty highway. Words that now shaped the meaning of everything that happened after. Justice isn't only found in a courtroom. Sometimes it begins the moment someone chooses not to turn away. She looked at the hospital, at the diner, at the bench, at the girl beside her, and at the life waiting ahead. I won't leave anyone behind, she thought. Not ever again.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.